Hi, my name is Dr. Robert Sarhan, and I'm here meeting Dr. Richard Fine. He's a recognized leader in the field of government, judicial, and political reform. He is a principal of Richard I. Fine and Associates, which was established in 1974 as an international law firm. He has more than 45 years of legal experience and over a decade of diplomatic involvement to inform his strategic work. Dr. Fine has a PhD in international law from the London School of Economics and Political Science, University of London. He also received a doctorate of law from law school in the University of Chicago and a bachelor in science from University of Wisconsin. He holds a certificate of public-private international law from the Hague Academy of International Law, a certificate of comparative law from the International University of Comparative Science in Luxembourg, and a Diplomate of Studies in Detroit Compare from the Faculty International pour in Detroit Compare in Strasbourg. He also has a certificate in mediating commercial and litigated cases from the American Institute of Mediation. Prior to Dr. Fine, with becoming in his law firm, Fine was a prosecutor for the U.S. Department of Justice and founder-in-chief of the first municipal antitrust division in the United States and special counsel to the Government Efficiency Committee of the Los Angeles City Council. Fine served as Consul General for the Kingdom of Norway in Southern California for 15 years. Fine makes frequent appearances as commentator on the CNN, NBC, and Full Disclosure Network and news outlets. Welcome, Dr. Fine, and thank you for being here.
Well, my pleasure, Robert.
We many of us have problems with the judicial system here in the United States and guardianships, and but we know that you're a real fighter and uncovered some precedential information on judges in California being given excessive amounts of money. And I wanted to ask, being a lawyer and uncovering this, can you tell us when you first uncovered these judges doing these crimes, how did you feel? I mean,
Well, I'd say shocked was really the first reaction when I found out about it. Because I was brought up to believe in the justice system, and
I think most of us are, but how much were these judges getting? I mean, how much was it? A larger sum of money?
yes, to put it in context, the judges received their compensation from the state of California. These were California judges, and they were trial judges, or known as in California Superior Court judges. At the time that I found out, which was basically in the year 2000, they were receiving approximately $178,000 a year, or basically, let's say $180,000 a year, plus benefits. The 178 was their salary, and then they got a retirement, which was, if they were in the office for 20 years, that would be 75% of their last salary. In addition to that, they got health benefits, they got other types of benefits, and so forth. They got contributions into their 401ks and all these different things. So basically, to just break it down, let's say they were getting $180,000 a year in salary. So their health benefits were basically about, I'd say 29% of that, or say 30% of it. So they're getting $60,000 a year in health benefits at a cash value. What happened is that the counties, particularly Los Angeles County, decided around 1985 that they were going to give the trial judges in LA County the amount of money that they were getting in their health benefits. They were going to give them another set of health benefits, which was equal to about $60,000, or $60,000 in cash. And they called those supplemental judicial benefits.
Okay.
And that's what they did. Now, the reason they did that is because the county supervisors in LA County, according to the LA County Charter, were being paid the same amount of compensation as the judges. So by giving them this extra money, they gave the $60,000 to the supervisors. And that raised the supervisor's salary up to the level of the judges. And so supervisors raised their salary by $60,000. Now, the
That's
problem
a
existed
nice gift.
is that the supervisors were only getting around $120,000 a year, so they got a $60,000 raise. The judges who were already getting $180,000 a year were now up to $240,000.
Wow.
Now, the problem that existed is that the county was getting sued at that point in time with about 750 cases a year for accidents and other sort of things, domestic violence, say, trouble with people suing them on land deals, contracts, and all these separate things. In addition to cases, criminal cases where the county is prosecuting and the other side is defending, family law cases where you split the family, the houses get sold, the county gets the taxes, probate cases where they put people into conservatorships or things, property gets sold, the county gets the taxes, all these things right across the line. And by the way,
How many judges were doing this? About how many judges and how many court officers or how many people were collecting this benefits?
over 450 judges.
Wow.
And because the Los Angeles Superior Court was the largest court. The second largest is Orange County, it's over 200 and some odd judges. And then you
So
get
it's
up
450 judges, and they're getting paid $60,000 bonus every year.
Yeah, and now it's already up to 70 and 75,000. In LA County alone, at that point in time, it was between 25 and $30 million a year. So, and the structure that was working at that point in time is that the state paid the money, but the counties contributed part of that money into the state. So the base of that money was coming from our state taxes, and it was coming from your county property taxes and your county sales taxes. So you, as a county resident, were paying double. You're paying part from your county property taxes, which was under contract with the state, and then you're paying another part coming from your sales taxes and your property taxes. So you get to pay double.
So the people, the taxes were going up. I mean, the taxes had to
Sure.
be higher to cover all these expenses. You know, to pay a judge that's supposed to be getting paid $178,000, now he's getting $240,000.
Exactly.
The money's got to come somewhere.
Yeah, the judge was now getting paid as much as an associate justice of the United States Supreme Court. In fact, sometimes more. So that's how it jumped up. But the more interesting thing that occurred is that when I looked at what had happened in the statistics of the LA court, of 750 cases coming in a year, 400 of them were immediately dismissed by the judge. And then when you looked at the cases that went to trial, maybe only one or two or three were decided in favor of the plaintiff. All the rest,
these cases that were being dismissed was so that the county would not be responsible for whatever
No, the
financially
county would not be
responsible.
responsible.
The what?
The plaintiffs who sued the county lost.
Right.
Yeah, maybe only 2 or 3 cases did the plaintiff win.
And they may have had legitimate reasons for suing,
Very much so.
and the
And
judge went. The judge broke the law for
basically,
his own benefit.
well, in some cases the judge may have been right, but in most of the cases we really don't know. He just dismissed it, either through what is known as a summary judgment or immediately dismissed it, claiming no cause of action. Some of the cases may have gotten settled. Cases that went to a jury trial, their decisions were different. You get maybe 25, 30 cases went in favor of the plaintiff, the rest in favor of the county. But the county would, if the county really knew that they were guilty, they might have settled a number of the cases.
Right.
But basically, the percentages were very much in favor of the county. So that's what happened. And the way that I found out about it was a whole different story. I was brought in a first case where a union found out that the county was taking money out of the environmental fund. The environmental fund was a special fund where the county would come in and inspect restaurants. And if they found that the restaurant was breaking the law, they would give them a citation. And if the case went to trial or something, the restaurant lost, the money would stay in the environmental fund and maybe more money would go in. Or they would inspect a swimming pool. Swimming pool was violating the law, they give them a citation. So the fund had maybe $45 million a year going into it. It's a fair amount of money.
Sure.
And what the county would do is the county would sweep that money out of the fund each year and put it into the county's general fund. And that general fund money would be used for everything.
To pay the judges.
Well, basically, and so the union sued, and we went to trial, and I won. And there was $11 million that was left in the fund, so that 11 million shifted back into the fund, and we enjoined the county from ever doing that again. So by the time we got from, say, the year 2000 up until now, there's over $1 billion in the fund. Well, I went to get my attorney's fees, and the judge denied the attorney's fees, saying that it's bad for a county union to sue the county. Wonderful idea for the county, not so good for the union. We appealed it, and a trial judge was put on the appellate panel. So we lost. I said, well, that's not so nice, especially for me. The next thing, and the union, the next thing that happened was a case that came in the harbors. There's a harbor fund, and these are all the harbors in California. And what happened there is LA County has one of the largest harbors in the country. So what the LA County did is they borrowed $150 million from the LA Harbor Fund, and they took $150 million in cash. So we sued, and I won in the trial court. I had an honest judge. And LA County complained. They said, well, we have a hospital problem. And the judge said to him, no, you don't have a hospital problem. You have a management problem. You're wasting money. So he ruled in my favor. The 150 million had to, basically the 300 million had to go back in the fund. We went up into appeal. Again, the LA trial judge was up on the appeal panel. He overturned the judgment. So once again, things were not looking good. Third case comes along. And on this case, there was a man who got divorced from his wife, and he had to pay child support. And his wife was on welfare for 2 weeks. So that meant that the welfare payments went into the county, to the district attorney's office. Well, he and his wife were friendly. And so she told him, "You're paying money in, I'm not getting it." We looked into it. We found for the previous 2 years, $14 million had gone into the district attorney's office, and nobody was getting paid spousal support or child support. And the district
Wow.
attorney was collecting the interest on all of the money and keeping it.
Oh,
We went
wow.
into court. The district attorney admitted that, yes, I'm doing this. And it was a winner for us. The county comes in and they move to dismiss the case. The trial judge dismisses the case. We go up into appeal, and just about this point in time, it was the year 2000, at the Judges Convention of the California Judges Association, the Chief Justice Ronald M. George of the California Supreme Court was giving a speech. And at that point in time, he said, the LA Superior Court judges should really take all of us to lunch on the amount of money that they're getting from LA County. And he said, that's wrong and maybe criminal or unconstitutional. And an LA County newspaper for lawyers published that. It was the Metropolitan News. And I picked up on it. So I put it into one of my briefs, my appellate brief. And that's how it got opened up. And that's how we really disclosed what was really happening. And that became the start of a very, very long story that is still going on today. At the time that we disclosed this, approximately around $450 million had already been expended illegally. I brought the first suit, they turned it down. Judicial Watch brought the second suit in 2006. And what happened, it went up, the trial court turned it down. It went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal said, nope, it's a violation of Article 6, Section 19 of the California Constitution. The monies were declared to be illegal. It went to the California Supreme Court. They denied review. So the decision was published and it was held. Then the judges got together with the LA Superior Court and they went into the California legislature and they went to Darrell M. Steinberg, who was the president pro tempore of the California Senate. And he wrote a bill called SBX211. And SBX211 said that the payments will be temporarily legal until the legislature changes the law back. So they're still illegal under the Constitution, however, and they were still illegal under the United States constitutional, under United States law, 18 U.S.C. Section 1346, which is the intangible right to honest services. But in California, they're going to be temporarily legal. And they also gave the judges who accepted the money, the Board of Supervisors and the counties who gave the money, and their employers who gave the money, retroactive immunity as of July 1st, 2008, retroactive immunity from criminal prosecution, civil liability, and disciplinary action. And that's where we are sitting today.
Are they still doing this today, collecting this money?
They still are doing it as of today. The illegal money is $1 billion to $1.1 billion.
Did you ever go to the FBI?
Well, I went beyond. Well, the FBI is a division of the Department of Justice, and under Obama, I went to the head of the Department of Justice, and from Obama onwards, I went, and before Obama, I went to the Department of Justice. Nobody has done anything. And at the present time, we've developed legislation to go in and take care of that problem and to forecast what we may be talking about. The legislation goes in, and this is for California, and establishes a state commission to oversee the Justice Department of California to set up. The commission will then set up compensation for the victims of judicial misconduct and judicial abuse of power. It will pay compensation to the victims. The controller will pay out the money, and the money will be taken out of the current budget of each year of the Department of Justice of the state. The auditor, the controller, will then turn over all of that money, all the victims that are to be paid, and pay it. The money gets taken out of the budget of the Department of Justice. The Commission on Judicial Performance will make sure all of the judges' names are investigated. They will have 6 months to act on that. The auditor will control that 6 months is taken care of and will report that to the legislature annually. And it will keep going that way. And on the commission, there will be a chairman, and there will be people representing all of the different actions, like the probate court, the family law division, contracts, all these different parts. None of these people will be lawyers, and none of these people will be former judges. Any judge who took money when they were a Superior Court judge will not be able to serve in any appointed position or elected position in state government anymore. And for any judge who was in a position that he was going to run again, there will be a retention election, so that if no one was running against him, he will have to be run again, and he would have to win by 50.1%. So that gives you the whole thing. And we're going to put in term limits for the judges, because we're going to put in a 24-year term limit, because a Superior Court judge's term limit is 6 years, an appellate court judge's term limit, and a California Supreme Court judge's term limit is 12 years. So basically, a Superior Court judge could run for 4 terms and stay there. That would give him 24 years. And an appellate or Supreme Court judge could serve for 2 terms, which would be 24 years. Or you could have a combination, but you're not going to be there for more than 24 years.
Well, that 24 years, they can cause a lot of people a lot of harm.
Well, it could, yes, but we can't control that particular part of it. But what we do, where we do have the control, is that if a person is harmed, they can go to the commission. And if the commission shows that they've been harmed, then they go into the process. And let's say they get harmed in the first year, if the guy's there or the woman is there. If they get into the commission works pretty quickly. So
is the commission who runs the commission?
The commission is run by the independent people. No lawyer, no former judge.
Okay.
It's going to be just the people. And the first chairman of the commission is going to be me. And you can only serve on the commission for 4 years. It's good, 4 years, and I think one extended term, which would mean 8 years, and then you're out. So you can't come back again.
Right.
So the time in the commission is not that long. And there's continuous turnover in the commission.
And
that gives you the overall.
And do you think that this is going to resolve the problem? The problems that in the courts?
You'll never resolve the problem of corruption. To quote Thomas Jefferson, someone asked him when the Constitution was made, they said, "How long do you think it'll take before corruption sets in?" He said, 3 minutes. So you can't ever, corruption is built in. You can never solve corruption. You can only keep active in preventing it. And to go further, Benjamin Franklin said, "We have given you a republic. It is your job to monitor it and keep it going."
As you know, many of us in probate court, our parents been forced into probate court into guardianships, and they basically rule competent seniors incapacitated, strip them of their civil rights, and then the judge, attorneys, and guardians go in and steal their entire estates, generations of assets, 401ks, social security money, their jewelry, their cars, their homes. And after everything is stolen, they put the seniors on a psychotropic drug such as Seroquel, and causes, in large doses, causing sudden cardiac death. Now, in the state of Florida, which is where I'm from, my mother was murdered in the guardianship. What can we do? What can we do throughout this country? You got that committee in California, which is fantastic. Can a person that has a probate matter go to that committee to try to prevent go in and say, hey, my mother's fully competent. She's not incapacitated. I want her out of this guardianship. Does the committee have the power to do something?
The California committee doesn't. But what I've done is I've set the thing up that you can take this legislation and you can go from state to state and put the legislation in every state. By setting up the categories and everything else, every state has a different problem. And with the overall categories, I've set it up that you can just transfer the categories and everything from state to state, and you can tailor it to the different problems that exist in each state. Like in California, the biggest problems are in probate and in family law. These are your two major problems. You also have a very big problem in the criminal law because the public defender system is set up to be run by the counties. So the county runs the public defender's office. You have an automatic conflict there because all the public defenders are paid by the county, and also the alternate public defenders are paid by the county. So consequently, the county is paying all these people that are employed. Another situation exists in that if the county wants to hire somebody that is not a county employee, the county would be paying that person. And you're going to have to trust that that person isn't going to be a county employee all the time, but they have to have integrity. Like, for instance, in the probate system, in the system that you're talking about, they have, in California, they have private lawyers that are continuously in the probate system representing the people that are employed as the conservators or are employed as the guardian ad litems. So these people are always in the system, even though they're on the private side. So they're really making money off the county. And people like your mother they're just grist for the mill. I mean, these people come in once, and that's it. But these other people, those lawyers, are there all the time. I had a personal experience a number of years ago in which it turned out that it was a family from Latin America, I think. And what happened is they were a very nice and educated family. The son had come up here. He married a woman. The woman got involved with a gang leader, and she was having an affair with the gang leader. She got pregnant by her husband, but she had the affair after the child was born. It was a newly born child or something. Anyway, they got into an argument. He was hot-headed, and he killed her. Now you had the young child, still a baby. The sister of the now dead wife wanted to come in and adopt the child. The grandmother came up from Latin America, and I don't know how they got a hold of me, but somehow or other through the family that was here, they called me, and I said, I do not have any experience in this area. But they said, look, we need somebody to come in, and you're ethical, so forth, to come in and represent the grandmother. So I got into the case, and what happened is that the first thing that needed representation is the judge said, look, we need somebody to represent the son who's going to be in jail for life. And the judge said, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, you're going to represent that son. He said, you're going to lose the case, but you're going to represent that son because I need an advocate who's going to represent that son to the best that he can be represented in this case. So I got appointed, and the county paid me to represent him. I lost the case, and then the judge said, and I was representing the grandmother. Then the judge said, we're going to go into trial with respect to the grandmother. And he said, he said, I know the grandmother really can't afford to pay you. He says, well, I'm appointing you to be paid by the county because the witnesses that were coming in were all county employees. And the understory of all this is that the judge was sick and tired of listening to these county employees coming in and lying to him. Because they would all come in and they give him this story, and the judge knew that he was being lied to, type of thing that you're talking about. In fact, and he wanted to teach them a lesson. And he said, I'm going to appoint you because you're not part of this system. He said, I'm going to let you take them apart.
Yeah, they have lawyers situated, and they're very close to the judge in Florida. They all have their own, they're sort of called, they have a little nickname for them, but they're all in with the judge, the certain attorney.
Exactly.
And so we see in these guardianship cases or conservator cases, one attorney representing the guardian, but at the same time representing the adverse party, but nobody knows except that maybe possibly the judges. So there's multiple conflicts of interest in these cases.
Well, the problem is they see each other each day in court, and this judge got tired of it. And so we started out in the adoption procedure, and what happened is that these witnesses came in, and the adoption attorney was used to adoptions, and those go very easily and everything. And when the witnesses came in, I would object, and he'd uphold the objections and everything else. And he just allowed me to just take them down and really tear them apart. And it was very funny because he was just smiling as this happened and everything. As the case came down the line and everything, at the end of the case, what he did do is he allowed the adoption, but he told the sister who was allowed to adopt the child, he said, here's the thing. He said, I'm going to allow the adoption, but I'm telling you, to the sister, he said, there better be a lot of visitation from the grandparents here in this adoption, because I'm allowing the child to stay in the United States, given what's happening in the other countries, and these grandparents better have the rights to be able to come in and see that child as much as they want. Be no holding back, because they're going to be able to come into this court and have those rights secured. So this was his way of just saying to all of these people, you try this stuff again, and it may not be Richard the next time, but there probably will be somebody coming in here that's going to make sure that these things are going to be right. It may necessarily be with another judge, but as far as this judge is concerned, things are going to straighten out here and straighten out fast.
And do you think that is it very difficult to get this what you're setting up in California, this committee? Was it very
Well,
difficult for you to get this set up?
yes. To be very blunt, we probably started way back maybe 2 or 3 years ago. 3 years ago, nothing happened. 2 years ago, nothing happened. This year, we had a full-blown blast. We sent copies of this legislation to every legislator. We met with a couple of the legislators, sent a copy of it to the governor. The governor blocked my email.
Wow.
Absolutely, to the couple of legislators that we met with, we met with their committee people, nothing happened. And absolutely, for the rest of them, absolutely no legislator responded to it. We tried to do it as a floor amendment, which would mean that once the legislation got to the floor, there's a procedure where you can amend on the floor. Didn't happen. And we amended it through the omnibus judiciary bill, which means it's an omnibus bill covering anything regarding the judiciary. Absolutely nothing happened there. The judiciary bill passed in August. The legislature is now closed. Governor Newsom has not signed the bill as of yet. I assume he will sign the bill. And the legislature, Tony Atkins, the president pro tempore of the state senate, has sent out her little notice saying, oh, we've done all these wonderful things this year in the legislature, done absolutely nothing for the hundreds of thousands of victims of judicial misconduct and judicial abuse of power. Nada.
Wow.
But that isn't stopping us. We're coming back.
And you know, in Florida, there is a lawyer who she is a lawyer who was trying to get people out of guardianships who were competent and could take care of themselves. And basically, I think that they threatened to disbar her. She requested, let me retire. She got 9 people out of guardianships. And we're blaming what's going on. When we complain to the Florida bar when we have conflicts of interest and things like that. But the Florida bar sided with the corrupt attorneys. And when we go to the Judicial Qualifications Commission, when we have a dirty judge, they basically say, well, we can't do anything about that. You'll have to appeal the judge's decision. So there's really no place to go in the state of Florida if you have a corrupt judge. You could disqualify him. You could try to disqualify him, but he's already done the damage. And the next judge is going to continue the same corruption. They won't let your parents or mother out of the guardianship, even though that her due process rights were violated, her constitutional rights were violated, and the medical reports show she's competent. So this is what we're all fighting here. I'm in Florida. We have numerous people fighting in Florida, but there's really nobody to go to, because when you go to the Attorney General of Florida, Ashley Moody, she says, well, my job is to protect the judges. I said, well, who protects the people? You have to hire a lawyer, she says.
Yeah. It's the same thing in California. I mean, you can deal in my own personal story and you find very much the same thing. In fact, even worse. So it's, that's the situation. And that's why we decided that you really need legislation and enforcement of legislation. I mean, I can actually tell you that it goes all the way up into the federal system. I recently finished a situation where I'm qualified to practice in the United States Supreme Court, and most recently, it ended in June. I did what is known as a petition for a writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this is a situation. There was a nurse, and she was a black nurse and highly qualified. And it turned out that this is again in LA County. LA County was the LA County USC hospital here in Los Angeles. And what took place is that there was a person who died in this was the Las Virgenes hospital. The person died and they wanted to cover it up. So they decided that they were going to blame it on a Chinese nurse. Now, a lot of the nurses are basically Filipino. So they wanted to use a minority nurse to blame it on the Chinese nurse. I think she was Chinese. So they came to this particular nurse and they wanted her to fill out the complaint. She said, no, not going to do that. So they decided to retaliate against the black nurse. So the first thing that they did is they said that she took some drugs out of the drug cabinet. They filled out this report. But they were so dumb, they filled out the report on the day that she was working at another hospital.
Oh, wow.
So this goes on. She shows that she was working at another hospital. So they take that up and it goes into the commissions and everything else. So that wasn't working too well, but they pushed it all the way through. The next thing that they do is they say that she's been investigated by the federal drug people. This whole thing goes up into a trial. The trial ends up with the first judge, who happens to be Korean, is in there and goes through the trial, and she leaves to do something or other on the last day when the trial goes into the jury, and another judge comes in. But at the same point in time, the school, USC, is deciding to hire a new general counsel. And the general counsel that they're hiring was also Korean, and he was a general counsel for Kaiser. Happens to be a friend of the judge. Anyway, he gets hired by USC. The jury comes back in about 30 minutes, and there's all these things happening with the evidence and everything else. And the jury comes back against her. Now, we now have a verdict coming down against her, a judge that knows the guy that becomes the general counsel for USC. Another judge comes in, and more things happen, and the case goes up into appeal. We now have the appellate judges. Two of the appellate judges have been judges in front of had taken money as superior judges in LA County. The third judge had represented LA County in the case that I mentioned, where it was held that the LA County money was illegal. So she now has three judges, all three judges that were bad. They're prejudiced. We now come up into the United States Supreme Court, and we're able to represent that all three judges in the Court of Appeals were bad. The first one because of the connection with the Korean guy who becomes a USC person, and also taking money from the county of Los Angeles. The other two and the Court of Appeals, who had taken money from LA County, and the third one, who had represented LA County and lost the case. Terrific case. You also have a rule in the Court of Appeals that if there's no opposition to your petition, it is deemed that the non-opposers have consented to your brief. Here I am in the United States Supreme Court. Should win, theoretically.
Right? They
US
did,
Supreme
they
Court,
did not oppose the appeal, right?
they did not oppose my brief
Okay.
at all. US Supreme Court denies review. They say no, denied. I say, you gotta be kidding. I go for rehearing. No opposition to the rehearing. Rehearing denied. Welcome to justice. So basically, we find that you can take my California law and extend it all the way up into the federal system, starting at the federal district court, going into the federal appellate court, and all the way up into the US Supreme Court. And the reason I tell you that story is because you're looking at legislation that can go all the way up to the top, right up to the US Supreme Court.
So you have all these judges, and I've experienced that too. You have all these judges that are this girl didn't even work at the hospital on that day. So there's no chance of possibility that she did anything wrong. Yet you go from one level to another level, all the way up to the Supreme Court. So which basically means is that all these judges are working together.
Well, it's either working together or they don't even have to work together. You can take them down to the same basis, that if there are payoffs or something that'll be in common, that the setup of the laws will prevent you from winning. And so you have to look at the source and follow the source all the way through. And the way that the source is set up, that there's a void that allows the lack of justice to happen. And that's how you get there. It's follow the money.
But the thing is that the people of the United States, I think most of us were under the premise that if we go to court and we tell the truth, we're in the legal right that we should win. But that's not happening, of course.
That's not happening. And the other interesting part about it is that as soon as I got up into the US Supreme Court, the County of Los Angeles and USC changed the name of the LA County USC hospital within 24 hours. They changed it and they have a whole new name. People at the hospital were wondering, suddenly they're getting a new name and all these things because they wanted to get out from under the stigma of having that name.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So, I mean, so the Board of Supervisors, in LA County, they got attuned to it very fast because they knew, wait a minute, we're up here with USC being sued and LA County and everything, and the whole stigma of what happened got out, and it's now national. They want to get out from under that. I don't think they even thought once we exposed what was taking place. But that's really what is happening. And I say to people, I do not have a problem with the system. I have a problem with the people that are in it.
And what about the media? Did any media ever cover anything in this case?
Well, the media is a whole different story. And once again, I can bring you back to my particular case with Judge Yaffe. In my case, what happened is Judge Yaffe, I disqualified Judge Yaffe in my case, right in the beginning. I said to him, Judge Yaffe, are you receiving $860,000 from the County of Los Angeles? And he said, yes. And the next day I came in with a written disqualification. Under the California law, a judge has 10 days to respond in writing to the written disqualification. If he does not, under law, he is disqualified. It's right in the law. It said if you do not respond in writing to a written disqualification, you have consented to the disqualification. Your clerk sends the things up to the presiding judge of the court sends the case to another judge. He did not respond. I don't know what the clerk did, but the presiding judge did not send the case to another judge. Judge Yaffe stayed on the case. He entered an illegal judgment for $45,000 against me as the lawyer. They then tried to enforce that judgment by asking me for my financials. I said, no, I'm not giving you any financials because your judgment is an illegal judgment because there was no judge. They then went in on an order to show cause to get me to give them the financials. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I put Yaffe on the stand again. I got him to admit again he got $860,000 illegally. He sat on the case as a judge, judging his own actions, which is a violation of U.S. versus Murchison, which is a U.S. Supreme Court case, which overrules every case in California. He sends me to jail to coerce me under solitary coercive confinement to give me the financials. I said no. 14 months later, he said, oops, I made a mistake. 4 months after that, he lets me out. He was trying to say I'm crazy, but I'm out. Nobody ever does anything to him, and he retires. Gets his pension, no less. Right after that, the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court retires because he got illegal payments when he was an LA Superior Court judge. A year after that, an Associate Justice of the California Supreme Court retires because he got illegal payments when he was a California Superior Court judge in LA. And a year after that, another Supreme Court judge of California retires because he got illegal payments when he was an LA Superior Court judge. Nobody did anything for any of them. That gives you the story. So this is what happens, exactly what you're describing in Florida, because no one takes any action against any of these people. And no one is taking any action because of the fact that there is no law in place to force them to take action, either at the state level or at the federal level. And the one thing that is missing in this is that people who are at the prosecutorial level have discretion. So the point that is missing in the system is the compulsion to remove the discretion and put in a compulsion. So right now, an attorney general has discretion in which case he can prosecute. That has a good and a bad to it. Like when I was in the antitrust division of the U.S. Department of Justice, the Attorney General had discretion in what case he was going to prosecute. And once he exercised discretion on what case he was going to prosecute, it got even worse because the large antitrust cases went to the President of the United States. And if you remember back, we had what was known as the AT&T cases, the ITT cases, Pacific Bell cases, and back in my day from 1968 to 72, you had the case where it was, I think, the IT&T case where it went up all the way up to Nixon was the president on this one. And you had a lobbyist for, I think it was IT&T, called Dita Beard. And she went to Charles Kleindienst, who was the assistant to the Attorney General for Antitrust, because McLaren, who was the assistant attorney general, you couldn't buy him off. But Kleindienst, who was the assistant attorney general, was buyable. So she went to Kleindienst on behalf of IT&T as a lobbyist, and then they went to Nixon and they bought off the IT&T case.
Well, what can be done? I mean,
So,
like for example, now that we're going through these problems that we have in this country now, all the criminal activity that these judges are committing. You know, we go to our attorney. Well, we don't normally. The regular person can't get to the attorney general. I just happen to get lucky to meet with her at a meeting, and they don't do anything but protect the judges. The Florida bar protects the corrupt attorneys. The judicial qualification, they state that they don't discipline a judge unless he uses a racial slur or something like that is the reason. But if he does a judgment that's you think is illegal, then you have to appeal his decision. The problem is that if we go to the next, we disqualify that judge, we go to the next judge and he does the same thing. You can't get your mother out of the guardianship even though she's mentally competent. And we had the medical reports. So what can be done? I believe that the FBI have to get involved because they have a job, and their mission statement in the FBI is to uphold the Constitution, protect people's civil rights, and combat all levels of public corruption. And we don't see the FBI doing anything. And in these cases, like in California, in your case, they put you in jail for all this time. I mean, there's got to be somebody to turn to, and it doesn't seem like the FBI is doing their job. Do you agree with that?
oh, definitely. In fact, there's a case. It's called Cooper versus Aaron, and it goes to exactly that point. It came out in 1958, and the case says that it's called when you're warring against the Constitution when you don't uphold your oath to support the Constitution. Now, and this is why really I developed the legislation, because what happens is that the FBI is actually a division of the Department of Justice. So what happens with the FBI, and particularly in today's world, is that the FBI is overloaded with a lot of the cases that are dealing with espionage and things on this order. And I can tell you the FBI has a lot of good people in it. But going all the way back into my day, the FBI got so overloaded with criminal cases that the people that were going out there to deal with, shall we say, the civil cases or even the criminal antitrust cases, they just didn't have the manpower. In fact, I can give you from personal experience that in the antitrust division, the FBI was supposed to do our investigation. We actually did our own investigation because we knew that to try and bring the FBI in on some of these things, they just didn't have the manpower.
They got 35,000 FBI agents in this country. Why
Yeah.
can't we should be able to, the people should be able to go to because we don't have committees like you have or you're gonna have in California. But until we can have some kind of structure like that, there should be at least 10 or 20 attorneys, say 20 attorneys, I mean, or 50 attorneys for each state that are just for
Oh,
corruption to go after these dirty judges. Because the most important thing in this country, the most important thing is when you go to court that you get a fair resolution. I mean, when you go to court, you don't just get turned down like they did and you went to the Supreme Court. You had to go all the way up to the Supreme Court because we know that the Supreme Court only hears what, 70, 80 cases a year.
yeah, this last year was
Right.
62 cases, and they got 4,400 petitions for a writ of
And I
certiorari.
believe that uh,
The,
I believe that the Supreme Court should have to listen to 4,400 of those cases. They should. They shouldn't be able to do
well,
this.
well, and here you're coming in. This is why I really developed the legislation, because part of the things that I'm looking at is that for all these writs of certiorari, and particularly in the case that I brought up, if in fact you have an unopposed writ of certiorari, there should be a law that says an unopposed writ of certiorari can be decided by a per curiam decision, which means the petitioner gets
Right.
what they want by per curiam decision. See, all 4,400 of them are actually looked at. This is the interesting part about it. They're all looked at, but because there is not a law that says if it's unopposed, it automatically gets decided in favor of the petitioner, what they do is they push it through, and going in with one of their rules that says that it goes to a division of the Supreme Court. So you need 5 people to be able to say, yes, we're going to look at it. So now it hits another layer. At that next layer, when you have 5 people that are going to say, well, we're only going to take so many cases, and this one is not one that's going to interest them that much, they say no. If you put that law in, all those cases would be approved. So what
What is
takes
that law?
place
What
is
is
they're
that law
putting
you're
it in
talking about?
the law that I would propose is that if you have an unopposed petition, that the petition is immediately granted by the per curiam
Okay.
decision. See, so let's say out of those 4,400, you have 2,000 of them are unopposed. You would have 2,000 of those taken
Right.
care of. So now they're only dealing with the
Right.
opposed ones. Now, when you're looking at the opposed ones, then they have to decide on the opposed ones, how many of those are you going to take? Because now you really have to look at the opposition as to you're making a decision. And out of those 2,000 of them, you have 7 justices who are going to take a look and decide. Well, for 7 justices to look at 2,000 decisions, that's not
Right.
too hard. I mean, that's pretty easy, in fact. So you got 2 problems that you're looking at. One, get rid of the unopposed
Right.
pretty fast, and you're now down into a workable unit. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is to go in and take a look at what you're doing in your work product. The Supreme Court, interestingly enough, is really a very wonderful place to work in, to be a lawyer. And I have to tell you, it's a real pleasure. But it has rules that have to be followed. And a lot of lawyers don't like to follow the rules. So that's going to remove 90% of your lawyers, if not 99%.
How many lawyers, do you know how many lawyers that clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court Justice?
Yeah. Every Supreme Court justice, I believe, has 2 clerks. So you have 14 lawyers that work for each Supreme Court justice. And in that way, the clerks really write up memos and they give them to the justices. Now, I've never been a Supreme Court clerk justice, but I'm making an assumption that the justice is going to read the memos from each clerk. So basically, it's a difficult job on the one hand, but to read that many memos is
Yeah,
not going
but
to kill you.
if they're unopposed, like you said, that could get rid of a couple thousand
Yeah,
of
if
them
they're
right there.
unopposed, it's easy. Yeah, that's right. So on the unopposed part of it is you also are going to be looking at the Supreme Court is a political court because, and you have to take that
Right.
into account, because the justices are appointed based upon their political beliefs. So when you have a Democratic president and based upon the Senate, because the justices are appointed with the confirmation of the Senate, you know, you're going to have a Democratic president. If you have a Democratic Senate, you're going to have a Democratic
I don't
judge.
think that should
If you
matter
have a
though.
Republican
We're
Senate,
talking about the law here. Doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or
I know that,
Republican.
but you got to deal with reality. And if you have a Republican Senate, you're going to have a more moderate, either a very moderate Republican or a very moderate Democrat. So right now under Trump, you have a right-wing Supreme Court. It's a 6-3 court
And
rather
do
than a
you
five
think
to
that
four.
there will become legislation where the U.S. Supreme Court will rule on the uh, unopposed Supreme Court certiorieries?
Well, the only thing that I can tell you is that I'm working on the legislation. I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you that I'm
So you're
optimistic.
trying to make special legislation for the U.S. Supreme Court to rule on these unopposed.
Yes,
Okay,
I I can tell you that I haven't finished it yet, but I am working on it, and
I think
I've got
that's
a way.
fantastic. I mean,
This,
because I actually went to the U.S. Supreme Court in my case, and we also got put out. They did not hear our case, so I want to thank you for that. That's
mm,
very important. That because when we go to the appeal and the judges rules against the law, and we're in the legal right, and then we take it to the Supreme Court and we don't get opposed, you know, and then they don't even hear, they don't give us a ruling. They say we're dismissed or whatever,
yeah,
we're denied.
denied they
Right,
give you a denied, and also Supreme Court is costly to go to because even on a very simple case, you have to
right,
have an appendix, you have
right.
to have your brief. Um, Minimum cost, for the most simple thing is going to be $3,000 to $5,000. Actually, it's going to be $3,000 to $6,000 in the most minimal type of case. Usually about $10,000 just for the printing, not
That's
counting the
right.
legal fees
And
involved.
and do you think that
So
there's any
it becomes
way that the Department of Justice, the FBI, will start monitoring these judges? Because I don't see there's not going to be any oversight. Do you think that there's any way that we can get the FBI to oversee these judges that are committing these crimes in these courts against the people?
the I frankly I don't have an answer to that part of it, and the reason I don't have an answer is because if you get into the situation of the FBI monitoring the judges, you get into another situation of almost a totalitarian government. I mean, and I'm going to shift you into a whole different type of thing. If suddenly you have one part of the government monitoring another part of the government, you don't have a balance of power. You have a balance of power with the judiciary monitoring what the legislative part does in the sense that it's balancing out if the legislature passes an unconstitutional law. You have a balancing of power if the judiciary monitors what the executive does. You have a balance of power if the legislature monitors what the judiciary does by if the judiciary makes a bad decision, the legislature can pass a law saying that was bad and we're going to correct it with a law. You can have the executive going out there and saying, okay, we don't have a law over this, but if something has to be done, so we can go out and do it. That's the whole basis of the Constitution.
The problem is
So
that when you have a judge, especially in these probate courts, they rule. They have right now. I know 2 live cases right now. My mother was fully competent, and they would not give her her rights back because we had too much money, and the judges wanted it. So now, right now, we have a 27-year-old young African American male who has been taken, kidnapped, has not seen his family in 7 years because he was born blind and the hospital gave him millions of dollars. The guardians and attorneys and judges want that money. So they basically sent the police to the house, ruled him incompetent, and now stealing his money. There's got to be some kind, and there's got to be somebody. I mean, now you're saying, okay, we can go into court. It could take years to go into court, and the judge still rules against you. You could disqualify the judge if the judge is ruling wrong. In most cases, I've disqualified probably 15 judges in my life, but the next judge does the same thing. So there's got to be some kind of quick access to the FBI, where the FBI, you come to the FBI, you show them these documents. Look, my mother's competent. They won't give her her rights back. The FBI should have the ability to go in there and stop the case, stop the judge. There's got to be something, because there's no oversight. The judges have so much power, and there's no oversight.
Okay, I'll give you a solution off the top of my head. I can't say it's going to be good, but I think what you're really looking at is you're looking at probably guidelines through legislation, because see, the FBI can only act if there's some type of a law. So you have to probably establish a law that will set up a guideline saying in such and such a situation, this has to happen. That gives the FBI a law that it can enforce. So you tailor it. Let's take the blind child. Now, if the child's an orphan, or if the child has parents, so if you say a blind child with parents, or a disabled child with parents, or whatever word you're going to use for disabled nowadays, with parents, you cannot go in and put this child under a guardianship. Simple. I use simple words like that and say that is the law.
And also, but the problem is that I agree with you. The other thing is we have to get these senators, congressmen to make these laws, to push them through, where if you have families that want to care for the parent, they do not have a legal authority to put them in with a professional guardian. In fact, if you have family that wants to take care of their parents, there is no guardianship. There could be, they can't establish a guardianship if I want to take care of my mother.
Well, that's really a very common situation. No, I agree with you on that. So, but I'm going to take you to the next step, because that's the step where we're in right now. See, it comes down to the legislators who refuse to act. So that puts us in the next step. And welcome to my world, because
I'm happy to be
now. You're
world.
in my world.
It's a step up.
Well, you're here. See, because in our world, who do you go to next? Because you're dealing with a legislator who refuses to act. what do? You have to get rid of the legislator, because the legislator is only there because people have voted for that legislator. So now we're down to the basic place, and that is, what do you do about the legislator? You've got to remove him or her. So we're into whose responsibility are we sitting with? We're sitting with voting. And that puts you, how do you get people to vote? That's one thing. But number two, how do you get decent people to run? And that means you're into A, money, or B,
And what
media.
about number three? Is it possible that if Trump gets back into power as president, he can do an executive order? Can he do an executive order for these laws?
Well, yeah, you can make an executive order, but the executive order will only involve the federal government unless there's an order that can come through the 14th Amendment. I have to say, I'm looking into, like, the laws that I'm looking into doing, if they can be carried through the Supremacy Clause. Now, the Supremacy Clause works in two ways. You have Article 3 and you have Article 6, Clause 2. And in Article 6, Clause 2, if it comes through the 14th Amendment, it'll affect the states. In Article 3, it's a straight supremacy. Executive orders, for the most part, are really going to work through Article 3, and some through, possibly some through Article 6. The executive order can establish parts of the federal government and things on this order, but it gets fairly dicey in how far the executive order is going to extend. You're better off doing legislation, because with legislation, it's going to be pretty clear if it's intended to overtake the state. It'll definitely come through the Supremacy Clause. It'll make it through
If the state is violating the 14th Amendment and the civil rights of the people, can't that executive order be enforced in the state?
Well, it will be. The state will then sue the federal government to try and stop it. That's what happens with the civil rights laws. And then it'll go all the way up into the Supreme Court. It'll end up one way or the other, depending upon the politics
because sometimes
of the court.
What you're saying, we understand we have to get rid of these elected officials. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to do so with the power that they have and the money that they're receiving.
Well, but see, there you can cut off the money. I mean, I'm involved in those things where you go in and you just say, well, if the state is misusing the money, you cut off the money. I'll give you the straight example. Let's say that you have a situation in which the state gets money for welfare, and the state takes that money for welfare and they're misusing it to go after going after men who are being accused of being the fathers of children where they're not the father. Well, the welfare money is for the children. But if the state's misusing that money to prosecute someone who's not the father, and they go into the trial, and the state can't prosecute them because they don't have the evidence. They don't have the. Let me just finish. This is an actual case. State goes in and they tell this guy, come in for a DNA sample. Guy goes in for a DNA sample, gives him the DNA sample. State prosecutes the guy. They get to the trial. State doesn't have the DNA sample. Then they go in and they get a judge Well, first they get a person who's appointed as a commissioner. They don't produce the DNA sample for that guy. So, but this commissioner says, well, I don't care. I'm ruling he's the father anyway. It goes up to a further commissioner who accepts the ruling of the first commissioner. Then it goes up to a judge, and the judge goes in, and he's being paid by the county, by the way. And he says, oh, I accept that. So then it goes up into a federal case, and we get into the federal case, and it's in Hawaii. And the judge in Hawaii, they're going along with the person, but then the county moves it to California, and we have a federal judge in California who got paid off by the county when they were a state judge, and they say, well, we're going to dismiss the case. So now you have the welfare payment that was going to go for welfare being misdirected into this case where everybody got paid off, and that's where we're standing. So what do?
Well,
You cut off the
but
welfare.
the thing is, how I understand of the media to get rid of these senators that been in there for 30, 40 years. I mean, we know that many of these senators been in there for 20, 30 years. You know, they're pretty much hard to get rid of them. But I understand social media is one way to do it, you know, because it's clear that we've all gone to our senators and congressmen in Florida, and they wouldn't do anything to change the laws. Even one senator told me, he said, I'm not changing the laws. I said, but the laws, the judges aren't following these laws. We need protection from these judges that are making fraudulent rulings. The senator says, well, hire a good lawyer.
Yeah. Well, you know what you tell the senator? Have a wonderful life, senator, because it's going to be shortened as far as you're being a senator, because we're going to start coming out with the
Right.
people against you. I mean, see, we're into the bottom line, and the bottom line is that right now we're into a wonderfully divided country, and the divisions in the country are of such a nature that unless you're going to come out with either social media or other ways to really get out there and let people know what's happening, nothing is going to happen. The Democratic Party has a lot of money, and I get things every day from the Democratic Party saying, give us $5 and we're going to make it into 15. And I get things every day from the Republican Party saying pretty much the same thing. I'm an independent, so I get it from both sides. So they're putting all of their things together. Now, who are they targeting? They're targeting people like me. They're targeting people like you. They want our money so they can go to their big donors and their PACs and everything else to get even more money. But the only way that they stay in power is the vote. Without the vote, they can't stay in power. Why do they gerrymander? Why do they draw those districts to be able to have the districts have more of their own people in it to stay in power? That's where the bottom line is. Now, what's happening with us? You have those people that are so proud to say, oh, I haven't voted in years. You know, what do we say to those people? We say very simply, they haven't voted in years. They're not going to vote in years. Forget about them. You don't have to worry about those people because they're off to the side. So now you're dealing with those group of people or that group of people that is going to vote. They're the aware group. So you target that group of people. I believe there are groups out there that have the list of people that you can get a hold of the voters. By getting a hold of the voters, we target those people. That's a hard job, but that's the job that we're going to have to get into if we want to make change. I never thought I was going to do these things. I mean,
So
you know,
we
I
have to
started.
get a list of names to try to get a list of names to uh, send emails or contact these people, tell them what's going on, what's in the guardianship or the probate courts. even foreclosure courts, bankruptcy courts, all these courts, that we need to have special legislation to protect the people.
Yeah, see, to draft the legislation, I won't say it's easy, but you have to, number one, you have to draft the legislation,
Right.
because you can't come out there and say, I'm interested in climate change. That's a platitude. Everyone's interested. It's like the beauty contest. I'm interested in world peace. That's wonderful. We're all interested in world peace. You have to have a solution, a very, very definite solution that you can demonstrate in one or two sentences. And the reason for that is most people's stream of consciousness, I'll use those words, is for 30 seconds.
But we need to have
So, and
people
I'll give you an
protection.
example. I did a series of interviews in KNBC, and the producer would tell me, Richard, you have 30 seconds to get out what you have to say. So that's it. That's your camera time. Whatever you have to say, make it in 30 seconds. So, number one, you have to know what you're going to do. Number two, you have to be able to express it in 30 seconds.
Okay, do me a favor. We're going to end the podcast, but I'd like to ask you a question. In 30 seconds, how can we protect ourselves from these judges that are making illegal rulings, and that, that of course we've gone to our senators complaining about guardianship cases where, our entire estates are being stolen. Our parents are basically being kidnapped. So how do we say this within 30 seconds, which I don't know if it's possible, but we need special legislation to protect the public from these corrupt judges. And I'm not just talking about probate. I'm talking about foreclosure judges. I mean, there's got to be a place that we can go. I mean, for right now, unless we had special legislation. But you see, I agree with you what you said before. The law is fine. It's just that the judges are not following the laws. Just like you had to go work your way up to the Supreme Court. On the first day in court, the case should have been dismissed. So what do we do? How do we get a protection when we go into courts and these are dirty judges having doctors, medical doctors that are also corrupted, and they're ruling competent seniors incapacitated, okay? Stripping them of their civil rights. And that's why I felt like the FBI should be involved, because they're supposed to protect people's civil rights. So how do we do this? How can we get this accomplished? I understand getting rid of the senators to have special legislation. I understand that. But like you said before, the laws are fine. It's just that the judges don't follow the laws. What do we do?
30 seconds?
30 seconds.
Okay. Hold your watch. Okay. Number one, we draft the law. Number two, we spread the law. Number three, we get rid of the legislators that are refusing to pass the law. Number four, we put in the people that will pass the law. Number five, we push the enforcement of the law. That's it.
And who's going to enforce that law?
The people that we put in. Because in the law, we have all of that put together. That's what I did in the law that I drafted.
What about in the meantime? In the meantime, can the FBI get involved to protect the people? Can they get involved? Do they have a legal right to go into the judge's office and say, stop what you're doing in this case? We have reviewed this case and we see inconsistencies or wrongdoing. Can they do that?
In the meantime, we look at every law that is available and see where we can find the corruption or the collateral act. One of the things that I do as a strategic consultant is I look at everything and I look at where is the violation. And that's what I push for. See, the people that tell you that a wrong decision goes up through an appeal and a collateral act, such as giving more money than the law allows to a politician or to a judge, automatically disqualifies that judge. If the judge is influenced by something, automatically disqualifies the judge. I look at all those things because I know if the judge just makes the wrong decision, you're stuck in the appellate courts. If you have the other situation, you're into the collateral acts, you get the disqualifications. First thing you look for is what's going to disqualify the judge. You look for all the collateral things, because if that's what's existing now, you're running through the collateral things. So deal with what you have to deal with in the present, while at the same time going to on the other side of it and go in and draft the laws and push the laws. You do these things simultaneously.
Right.
So presently, follow the money. Follow the money or
Right.
follow the disqualifications, whatever they may be. I'll put it to you in a very simple way. If you've ever read The Art of War, then you look at the entire battlefield and then look at those things in the battlefield that you can use. You don't have to be World War I or World War II. All you need are razor attacks. And when you get the judge on the razor attack, you go in, you do what you have to do, you get out.
But in the meantime, can the FBI be utilized to help the people, since that we don't have any committees, and the judicial qualification is a joke? The Florida bar is protecting the dirty attorneys. Can the FBI take part in protecting the people? Because that's what they were set out to do in the beginning.
Well, the answer to that is yes, if you find a particular law that the FBI can use. And that's going to mean looking at the civil rights laws.
Right. Civil rights. What about the mission statement, which says combat all levels of public corruption?
You can use that, but in that you want to find the particular part of public corruption, so you can walk into the FBI saying, here's the public corruption part, here's the part that is exactly within public corruption that is taking place. Because unfortunately, in today's world, with bureaucracies, you have to give the bureaucracy the exact part, because the bureaucracy or the people within the bureaucracy are not going to think for you. You really have to come in and tell them what they have to do.
What if you have some kind of evidence, for example, that a person that has been ruled incapacitated, but you have medical reports that show that that person is fully competent? Is that tangible?
What you have to do there is go in and find what part of the law says that a person that is competent cannot have a guardian.
We have that.
Okay, so you quote that, you take that part of the law, you put that on the top.
Right.
And then underneath it, you show, here is the report that shows that he is competent. Here is what the other side has, and that shows that he is competent also. That way, if you have two conflicting reports, then it may be up to the judge. But if you can show that the report that is trying to say that he is incompetent is not really true, then it's going to be the weight of the evidence, and then you're going to win.
Well,
so that'll be a question of organization. So if the first report saying that he's incompetent you have a subsequent report that shows that he's competent, you should be able to win. Or if you can show that, or another way, if you can show that the inspector that they're using has a history of calling people incompetent,
right.
when actually there's a history of showing people that they are competent. After that guy comes through, you can show that that inspector is incompetent.
Right.
So look beyond. And then you come into the FBI and you can say, hey, here's a guy that shouldn't be in the job, or he's on the take,
Right.
or he works with all these lawyers consistently.
There you
Something's
go.
wrong here.
Right.
Look beyond just the first thing. Little originality.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fine. Your inspiration. I want to thank you very much for coming on this show.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Thank you for all the insight, and I'm actually going to look into this, the legislation, special legislation, and things like that. You know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
And
you
have
for
a
having
nice
me.
day. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.